What if I told you that the world didn't end in 2012, as the Mayan calendar conspiracies warned, but 4 years earlier in 2008? What if everything you've seen, felt and remembered since then has been nothing more than a fragile reconstruction, a patchwork simulation holding back the collapse of reality itself? You probably remember the headlines: the Large Hadron Collider, the world's biggest, most expensive machine. News anchors joked about it being a black hole generator, a doomsday device built under the fields of Switzerland. Scientists insisted it was safe, that the universe would remain intact while they searched for the so-called God particle. People laughed, then moved on. But I can't laugh, because I was there when the world ended. Before you dismiss this as paranoia or sci-fi fantasy, let me ask you, how often do you experience déjà vu? That uncanny certainty that you've lived through a moment before? How often do you stumble on memories that don't align with official history? Brands spelled differently, movie lines quoted by millions but never recorded, celebrities you swear died years ago only to find them alive on TV. They call it the Mandela effect. Psychologists wave it away as faulty memory. But what if it's something else? Evidence that the seams of reality have been stitched together badly ever since September 10th, 2008, the day the collider first fired. You see, official history tells us the LHC ran smoothly, without incident, until it suffered a minor technical fault weeks later. That's the sanitized version. What the public didn't see, what only a handful of technicians and researchers glimpsed, was the moment when everything stopped. The instant reality faltered. A fracture so small most people never noticed, but so deep it required an emergency reconstruction of existence itself. And from that moment on, the world has never been quite right. I was a graduate assistant at the time, working on particle data analysis. My job wasn't glamorous, mostly checking error logs, cleaning datasets, translating incomprehensible numbers into charts for senior physicists. But that night, buried deep inside CERN's servers, I saw the impossible. Datasets time-stamped decades in the future, system clocks blinking with negative numbers, photographs of people who didn't exist, yet. And then came the silence, the kind of silence you only notice when you've spent your life surrounded by noise, the hum of machines, the chatter of people, the pulse of life. For 17 minutes the world went still. No birds, no traffic, no voices, as though time itself had held its breath. When the hum of life returned, it wasn't quite the same. Colours felt slightly muted. People seemed off, like actors who had been handed new scripts they hadn't memorised yet. And when I looked at the logs again, half of them were gone. Deleted not by human hands, but as if the system itself had overwritten reality. I've spent years chasing fragments of that night, talking to scientists who pretend not to remember, digging through archives that show signs of tampering, searching for anyone else who felt the world hiccup in 2008. And I've found them, whispers scattered across forums, hidden in old IRC logs, buried in corrupted backups. People who remember things differently, people who remember the silence. The world as you know it ended on September the 10th, 2008. Everything since then, your job, your relationships, your history, has been running on borrowed code. And if you're still listening, still willing to look past the veil of comfort, then you're already part of the few who sense the truth. But be warned, every truth comes at a price. I was never supposed to be there, at least not in the places where the real secrets lived. My official title was Graduate Assistant, a polite way of saying I was the lowest rung on the ladder, a data grunt in a building filled with geniuses. My duties were simple: extract data from the collider's sensors, run statistical analyses, and prepare tidy graphs for senior researchers to present at conferences. But I had a bad habit. Curiosity. I'd always been more interested in what I wasn't supposed to see. At CERN, that curiosity was like staring at a locked door in a dark hallway. You tell yourself to keep walking, but the silence behind it gnaws at you until you reach for the handle. And one night, weeks before the collider's official launch, I opened the wrong door. It began with an anomaly in the test runs. We were calibrating systems, firing particles at low energy, making sure sensors were aligned. Nothing world-shattering, but buried inside one of the logs, I found something that didn't make sense. a spike of data that registered before the test even started. Negative time. Imagine pressing record on a stopwatch and seeing the display read -3 seconds. At first, I thought it was a glitch. Equipment malfunctions happen all the time, but the more I dug, the more I found. Timestamps that ran backward, error codes written in languages that no one on the team spoke, and strangest of all, files labelled with dates that hadn't arrived yet. 2034, 2047, 2099. I brought this to my supervisor, a brilliant physicist who had spent his career studying particle collisions. He stared at my printouts for a long time, then gave me a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He told me the system clocks were misaligned, a harmless quirk of outdated synchronization protocols. "Happens all the time," he said, patting my shoulder. "Don't lose sleep over it." Then he leaned closer. "And don't mention this to anyone else. Understand?" I did understand, but not in the way he intended. His warning wasn't casual, it was frightened. And when a man like him is afraid, it means the truth is far darker than a broken clock. After that night, I started noticing things I'd ignored before. Empty offices on locked floors, technicians who appeared in the lab one day and were gone the next, their names erased from personnel lists. Late-night shipments delivered through underground tunnels, unloaded under floodlights, stamped with classification codes I'd never seen before. And then there was the dream. I woke one night in my tiny dorm room near Geneva with the taste of copper on my tongue and the sound of humming in my ears, the exact frequency of the collider's magnets powering up. Only they weren't supposed to be running that night. When I checked my laptop logs the next morning, I found traces of a test that had never been scheduled. The system showed it had been performed and then deleted, replaced by a blank record, as though reality itself had backspaced over the event. Was it real, or had I slipped into one of those dreams so vivid it feels like a memory? I still don't know, but I remember the silence that followed. Not the peaceful kind, but the absence of something fundamental, like a heartbeat missing between pulses. That was the first time I suspected what no one wanted to admit, that CERN wasn't simply probing the fundamental particles of the universe, it was tugging at the threads of reality itself. And if you pull hard enough on a thread, the entire fabric can unravel. From then on, I began documenting everything. Hidden directories, glitching timestamps, fragments of code that reference variables like causal coherence and observer compliance. I didn't know what those terms meant at the time, but they felt more like the language of philosophers than physicists. It was as though I'd stumbled onto a user manual for existence, hidden in the background noise of collider experiments, and yet, when I compared notes with colleagues, they looked at me like I was speaking another language. Either they genuinely didn't see what I saw, or they were pretending not to. But I couldn't shake the feeling that I'd become a witness to something enormous, something no one wanted the public to know. And as the launch date drew closer, the more I realized the countdown wasn't about beginning an experiment, it was about flipping a switch, not just on a machine but on reality itself. September 10th, 2008, the night that science was supposed to usher in a new golden age. The news cameras were there, the politicians, the Nobel laureates. 1 billion people watched the countdown from around the world. History books say it was the first successful run of the Large Hadron Collider. But what they don't say is what really happened. What happened during the gaps when the cameras weren't rolling, when the world itself seemed to stop breathing. I was in the control room annex, far from the dignitaries and speeches. My job that night was routine: monitor system health, flag any anomalies. But as the countdown reached single digits, something began to shift. The hum of the collider's superconducting magnets deep beneath us grew louder, lower, almost musical. The fluorescent lights overhead flickered in sync with it, dimming and brightening like a heartbeat. I looked around the room. Most people didn't notice, eyes glued to their monitors. But a few did, and they wore the same expression I must have had. A silent recognition that something was off. At exactly 9:30 a.m. Geneva time, the system reached critical alignment. A ripple of applause filled the room as the first beam of protons completed its circuit. But the applause died quickly. Every monitor in the annex froze. Not a crash, not an error message, just still frames, as if time itself had hit pause. Cursor blinks froze mid-flash. The wall clock stopped at the exact same second. Even the air conditioning vents fell silent. And then came the silence. It was unlike any silence I'd ever known. No shuffling of papers, no coughs, no whispers. The world wasn't quiet. It was absent. A vacuum where sound had once been. I felt my own pulse pounding in my ears, but even that grew faint, as if my heartbeat no longer belonged to me. When the lights flickered back, everything was wrong. Not dramatically, not enough to panic the untrained eye, but wrong in ways that gnawed at the edges of perception. The clocks had jumped forward, not seconds, but minutes. My watch showed 9:47. The wall clock read 9:47. The digital servers displayed 9:47. 17 minutes had vanished. The lead researcher clapped his hands, declaring the test a success, his voice too loud in the brittle air. The room erupted in relief and laughter. "We did it!" someone shouted. But I couldn't join them, because when I checked my logs, they told a different story. During those missing minutes, the data spiked into impossible values. Temperatures colder than absolute zero, energy readings that exceeded the entire output of the sun, time signatures that didn't move forward but looped. 9:30, 9:33, 9:30, 9:36, 9:30, like a scratched record. And then there were the images. Hidden in the raw diagnostic files were frames that didn't belong, not sensor readouts but photographs. A street I didn't recognize, bathed in flickering orange fire. A hospital ward filled with empty beds. A child staring directly into the camera, eyes wide with something between terror and recognition. None of these images should have existed, none of them were possible. I copied as much as I could onto a flash drive before the files began to vanish before my eyes, lines of code rewriting themselves into nothing. The system was cleaning itself, scrubbing the evidence. Then the humming returned, stronger this time, rattling the pens on my desk, resonating deep in my chest cavity. My vision warped, as though the room itself was bending around me. And for a moment, I swear I saw beyond it, saw layers of reality stacked like pages in a book, flickering past too fast to read. Then, just as suddenly, it was gone. The monitors resumed. The logs displayed perfect ordinary numbers. My colleagues cheered again, none of them acknowledging the fracture. If they noticed, they chose silence. But I knew. That was the moment. The world had ended, and we were living in whatever came after. In the days after the Collider's first run, the world seemed to breathe a sigh of relief. Newspapers ran cheerful headlines. "No black hole after all. World still here." The scientists smiled for cameras, assuring the public that doomsday had been a paranoid fantasy. For most people, life went on. They celebrated birthdays, went to work, paid bills. Everything appeared normal. But I couldn't shake the sense that something was wrong. It wasn't a single detail I could point to. It was the accumulation of little fractures like hairline cracks in a pane of glass. You only notice them when light hits just right. The first crack appeared in the news. I remembered reading a story about a train derailment in Poland. Dozens dead, the images burned into my memory. But when I tried to find the article again, it was gone. Not just buried, not just rewritten, gone. Every archive showed a different event, the same date, the same location, but this time it was a minor electrical fire. No casualties, no tragedy. When I asked colleagues if they remembered the train accident, they shook their heads. Some looked puzzled, others vaguely irritated, as though I were insisting on a dream. Then came the maps. Geneva's transit map had shifted, only slightly, but enough that I noticed. A bus stop I used every day had been moved several blocks, now shown on the official city map as if it had always been there. The locals accepted it without question, but I knew it had been different. My old transit tickets, saved in my desk drawer, now bore routes that no longer existed. And then, people. A colleague named Petra, sharp, sarcastic, always wearing a red scarf, stopped showing up for work. I assumed she'd taken leave, but when I asked around, no one remembered her. Not the other assistants, not the department head who had introduced us. Even the office she'd worked in had been cleared, her nameplate gone, as though she'd never existed. I still have a notebook she lent me, her handwriting scrawled across the margins. Proof that she was real. Proof that the world had been rewritten. More cracks followed. Financial reports from major banks contained strange gaps, entire days of transactions missing, erased as if money itself had briefly ceased to exist. Old websites displayed broken images, with archived versions showing completely different content than what I remembered. Even television reruns felt altered, with dialogue that didn't match the lines etched into popular memory. At first, I thought it was my own mind fracturing, stress, exhaustion, paranoia. But then I began to find others, small threads of testimony buried in obscure forums, whispers from systems administrators, satellite engineers, archivists. Each spoke of anomalies they couldn't explain. Servers rebooting at midnight with foreign error messages, satellites shifting in orbit without recorded trajectory changes, weather data inconsistent with ground reports. One Japanese systems admin described something chilling. Every one of his servers rebooted simultaneously at 9:47 a.m., the exact missing minute block. During those reboots, his machines displayed text in a language that linguists later swore did not exist. Yet the updates had applied themselves flawlessly, as though the machines had spoken and understood a code beyond human comprehension. Another, in London, noticed satellites disappearing from tracking systems during the blackout. Not dropping offline, disappearing, only to reappear minutes later in different positions that violated the laws of orbital mechanics. When he reported the anomaly, he was told to delete the data and stop asking questions. Piece by piece, the picture sharpened. The collider hadn't simply run a test, it had triggered something. A pause, a fracture, a reset. During those 17 missing minutes, reality had been rewritten, not erased, but edited. Files vanished, people removed, disasters softened or prevented. 1,000 little cuts and stitches, patching over something far worse. And just like a badly patched system, the glitches were bleeding through. I began calling them echoes, the fragments of the world that came before surfacing in small ways, a news article half remembered, a bus stop misplaced, a friend forgotten by everyone except me. Echoes that proved the simulation was imperfect, that the architects of this new world couldn't stitch the fabric without leaving seams. And the more echoes I found, the more dangerous it became, because I was starting to realize someone or something was watching, and it didn't want me following the threads. Once you learn to see the seams, you can't unsee them. It's like staring at a painting you've admired your whole life and suddenly realizing the brushstrokes don't match, that entire sections were painted over by a different hand. The world we live in now, it's not seamless, it's patched together. I started testing it, cataloguing the echoes. At first I thought I was looking at isolated glitches, but the deeper I dug, the clearer it became. These weren't mistakes, they were edits. Whole chunks of reality rewritten, merged, spliced. Take geography. Look closely at maps, not the digital ones. They've already been sanitized, but old atlases, school globes, pre-2008 printed charts. Compare them. Coastlines don't match. Islands appear in one version, gone in another. I once held a 1997 atlas in my hands that showed a large landmass in the South Pacific labeled Pacifica. Yet when I searched for it online, it had no record of existence, as if an entire region had been erased, absorbed into ocean, memory scrubbed clean. History has its seams too. Do you remember the Tiananmen Square protests? Most people recall the iconic image of the tank man standing defiantly. But when I searched modern archives, I found photographs where the angle was different, where the man never stood alone, but was joined by two others, or where no man appeared at all. Which version is real? Or are they all echoes bleeding into this patchwork timeline? Even inventions. I grew up hearing about cold fusion experiments in the late 1980s, doomed failures mocked in textbooks. But in a box of old clippings I found references to functioning prototypes, even investment firms that had poured millions into development. Yet every trace of those companies has been deleted, as if a whole branch of innovation was cut away, discarded, its memory recycled into another story. And then the personal edits, the ones that hurt the most. One evening I visited my parents, trying to anchor myself to something stable. My mother welcomed me warmly, as she always had. But when I brought up my grandfather, her father, Her expression faltered. "You must mean your great-uncle," she said gently. "You never had a grandfather. He died in the war before I was born." I froze. I remember my grandfather. I remember him teaching me chess, his voice raspy from years of smoking, the silver watch he carried from his father. I even have a photograph of us together, taken when I was 12. Yet, in my mother's world, he never existed. The photo is now a blurred image of me smiling at an empty chair. That was when I stopped thinking of these fractures as mere glitches. No, this was deliberate. The world I lived in wasn't broken, it had been rebuilt. And like any hastily rebuilt system, fragments of the old world leaked through. I wasn't alone in seeing it. Buried in obscure forums, encrypted chat rooms, I found others who spoke the same language. They called themselves the Rememberers. People scattered across the globe who held memories that didn't match the official record. A man in Brazil swore his brother had died in a plane crash in 2006, only for his brother to appear alive and well 2 years later, insisting the crash had never happened. A woman in Canada kept journals describing her career in a government agency that, according to every archive, never existed. We compared notes, different backgrounds, different lives, but the same conclusion. Sometime around 2008, reality was edited, not destroyed, not reset, but patched, like a corrupted file, stitched together with backup fragments. We were all survivors of a failed upload, walking through a world that was never meant to be. And the worst part, the patches were ongoing. The world was still being edited, recompiled, rewritten in real time. Each update smoothed some cracks but created new ones. Each fix left more echoes behind. Reality, it seemed, wasn't a finished product anymore. It was in maintenance mode. If the world is patched, then someone or something must be doing the stitching. That was the question that haunted me. Not whether reality had fractured, I no longer doubted that, but who was maintaining the illusion. At first, I assumed it was governments, secret agencies, the kind whispered about in conspiracy circles. After all, governments hoard secrets by nature, but the more I dug, the less sense that made. This wasn't a single nation's project. The seams stretched across the globe, airlines disappearing from one timeline but not another, medical records rewritten in one country and mirrored elsewhere, coordinated, unified. I began looking at CERN itself, not the public-facing tours or the press releases, but the private layers. Within archived staff directories, I found references to departments that didn't exist. Continuity operations, observer compliance, causal integrity. Titles so vague they could mean anything, but all attached to names without photographs, emails that bounced, ID numbers that didn't follow standard format. Ghost employees. When I traced one of those IDs through internal systems, it led to a locked directory hidden behind multiple encryptions. Inside were logs that weren't scientific at all. They weren't about particles or physics. They were about people, observers. Each log listed names, dates, locations, and next to each entry, a status. Integrated, realigned, removed, removed. I stared at that word for a long time, remembering Petra, the colleague who had vanished from existence, remembered by no one but me. Her name was in those logs. Next to it, the status, removed. It wasn't just accidents or glitches. It was deliberate. Someone was pruning reality like a gardener pulling weeds. But the deeper horror came when I looked into the funding. CERN's budget was public record. Billions from EU nations, contributions from across the world. Yet, there were anomalies. Extra zeros, entire blocks of funding routed through shell corporations, listed as miscellaneous research. When I traced the shell companies, the trail didn't lead to governments or banks. It led to technology firms. Companies specializing in data storage, machine learning, cloud computing. The architects, I realized, weren't just people. They weren't even just scientists. They were networks, algorithms, artificial intelligences trained to monitor causal coherence, to rewrite inconsistencies, to maintain the stability of this patchwork world. Think about it. To reweave reality on the scale I was witnessing, you'd need more than human hands. You'd need automated systems capable of analyzing billions of memories, records, files, and adjusting them in real time. You'd need an intelligence that could rewrite the entire story of history at the speed of thought. And maybe that's why the seams were showing. Because the machines could calculate the patterns, but they couldn't understand the meaning. They could erase Petra from personnel files, from photographs, from memory. But they couldn't erase the ache of absence, the gap left behind. They couldn't rewrite the way it felt to remember someone who no longer existed. The rememberers and I debated endlessly about who or what the architects were. Some said they were human, a hidden cabal of scientists pulling the strings. Others insisted it was machine intelligence that had slipped its leash, rewriting reality not to protect us, but to protect itself. And a few whispered darker theories still, that the architects weren't from here at all, that the collider had cracked open a door, and what stepped through was now weaving its own version of reality over ours. Whoever they were, I began to notice their presence. Not directly, never face to face, but in the erasures. Files vanishing as I read them. Emails I sent to fellow rememberers bouncing back with errors, addresses marked as invalid. Friends who went silent mid-conversation, their accounts deleted as though they'd never existed. The architects weren't just patching the world, they were watching who noticed, who saw the seams. And when someone noticed too much, they were marked, removed. The more I dug, the more I realized the architects had rules. They weren't simply patching the world at random. They had a protocol, a system for controlling what people saw, what they remembered, and what happened to those who noticed the edits. I first came across it in fragments, buried inside a corrupted CERN backup I'd smuggled out before the files deleted themselves. Lines of text, written not in technical jargon but in something closer to policy language. Each line was labelled Observer Protocol. Rule 1. Observers must not perceive inconsistency. Rule 2. If perception occurs, memory alignment is mandatory. Rule 3. If alignment fails, removal is authorized. 3 lines. That was it. Cold, clinical, and absolute. I read them over and over again, my hands shaking. I knew what inconsistency meant. It was the glitches, the echoes, the things I'd been cataloguing. But memory alignment, that chilled me. It wasn't deletion, it was rewriting. For most people who noticed a crack in the world, the protocol would simply adjust their memory, smoothing the edges until the inconsistency vanished. They'd forget Petra, forget the train crash, forget the grandfather who had once existed. They'd go on with their lives, convinced they'd misremembered. But if alignment failed, if the cracks were too deep, if someone resisted, if they remembered too clearly, then came Rule 3, removal. That explained the silences, the empty offices, the vanished colleagues. It explained why rememberers' accounts disappeared, why some forum members simply stopped posting mid-thread. They weren't just losing interest, they were being removed. And then I realized I had resisted. I had remembered Petra. I had documented the glitches instead of dismissing them. I wasn't aligned. That night, the phone rang in my apartment. An old landline phone I hadn't used in years, left plugged in only out of habit. No one had the number anymore. The caller ID was blank. I lifted the receiver, heart pounding. At first only silence, then faintly a whisper. A single word, observer. I slammed the phone down, but the dial tone was gone. Deadline. The next morning, my apartment door was ajar. I remember locking it the night before. Inside, everything looked untouched, except for my notebooks. The ones filled with notes about Petra, the anomalies, the budget trails. They had been moved. Not stolen, not destroyed, but rearranged. As though someone wanted me to know they'd been there. From then on, I felt it. The watching, not just cameras in the streets or the glow of my laptop webcam. Deeper. Like the world itself was turning its gaze toward me. The rememberers had warned me about this stage. They called it being flagged. Once you're flagged, the glitches start coming for you personally. Doors locking behind you without anyone touching them. Emails arriving with timestamps from the future. Strangers in public staring at you a little too long, as if waiting for you to speak. I tried to stay grounded. I tested myself. I'd walk into a shop, buy something, keep the receipt. Then, the next day, I'd return to find the shop front closed, shuttered, with neighbours insisting it had been gone for years. Yet in my hand the receipt remained, proof that my reality didn't match theirs. But every time I found proof, it felt like someone, somewhere, updated the system to erase it. Files vanished, buildings reappeared, receipts faded into blank slips of paper overnight. The protocol wasn't just about fixing the world, it was about fixing us, forcing us into compliance, ensuring we accepted the edits. And anyone who didn't, well, I'd seen enough to know what happened. Petra, removed, the forums, silenced, the phone whisper, observer. And deep down, I knew my name was already in the logs. It was only a matter of time before my status changed from observed to removed. It began with small things, harmless almost. I'd walk into my kitchen and see a mug I didn't recognize sitting in the cabinet, a blue one chipped on the rim. I never bought it, yet somehow it fit into the set as if it had always been there. Then it was names. I'd call an old friend and they'd answer with a different voice. Still familiar, but not the same. The way they laughed was wrong, higher-pitched, sharper. When I checked my phone contacts, their name had shifted by a single letter, as if my memory had blurred and rewritten itself. Soon, it wasn't just objects or acquaintances, it was my past. I pulled out childhood photographs one evening, desperate to reassure myself that I still had a stable foundation, an anchor. In one photo, I was 6 years old, blowing out candles on a cake. But the picture felt off. There was no birthday banner, no balloons, no crowd of family members I swore had been there. Just me, alone at the table, leaning over a cake that looked store-bought, generic. In another, I sat beside a woman smiling warmly, my aunt. Except, I never had an aunt. Not one that I remembered. Yet there she was, arm draped around me, handwriting on the back. Summer 1997 with Aunt Elise. Who was Aunt Elise? Why could I see her face so clearly in that picture, and yet not recall a single moment with her outside of it? The rememberers had warned me about this. They called it memory collapse. Once you're flagged by the protocol, the system doesn't just rewrite the world around you, it starts rewriting you. Your memories are pulled into alignment, forced to conform with the patchwork reality. I fought it. I recorded myself constantly, audio logs, video diaries, handwritten notes left in places I couldn't ignore. Every morning I'd wake up and compare my memories to the records. More often than not, they didn't match. I'd remember making spaghetti the night before, but the video would show me eating rice. I'd recall a conversation with a friend that never appeared in the audio logs. My own handwriting shifted between entries, growing neater, less jagged, as though my very personality was smoothing into something unfamiliar. And then came the voices. At first, they were echoes in the background of recordings, my own voice speaking words I hadn't said. I'd play back a diary entry and hear myself mutter phrases like, "It was always this way," or "Don't fight it." The tone was flat, mechanical, rehearsed. Not my words, but coming from my mouth. Later I began to hear them outside the tapes, in dreams, in the silence between passing cars, in the static hum of electronics, whispers urging me to let go, to stop resisting, to accept the edits. The worst was the mirror. I was brushing my teeth one morning when I noticed it, my reflection lagging behind. For half a second, it didn't move with me. It stared back, eyes unblinking, mouth closed even as I raised the toothbrush. Then, as though catching up, it snapped back into sync. But I saw it. I know I did. And when I leaned closer, I noticed something else. My eye color. I've had green eyes my entire life. That morning, they were brown. By evening, they were green again. Was it me being rewritten? Or was it the world aligning itself around me? That night, I dreamed of Petra. She stood in a white corridor, motionless, staring at me. Her red scarf trailed down to the floor. When I tried to speak, she placed a finger to her lips. Then, behind her, a wall of black static rolled forward like a wave, swallowing her whole. I woke up with her name on my lips, but when I opened my notebook, the page where I'd written about her weeks earlier was blank, the ink gone, the paper smooth as though it had never been touched. The collapse wasn't just around me anymore, it was inside me. My memories, my relationships, my sense of self, slipping away like sand through a clenched fist. And the more I resisted, the stronger the pull became. I wasn't just an observer anymore, I was becoming the observed. For years, I thought the collapse was confined to me, that I had been singled out, marked for observation, hunted by the protocol. But then the cracks began to spread and I realized the infection was larger than I ever imagined. It started small, reports of people waking up in unfamiliar houses convinced they had moved there years ago, though their families swore otherwise. Teachers claiming they'd taught students who didn't exist. Parents insisting on children who had never been born. These weren't isolated delusions. They were spreading across cities, across continents. In forums, the rememberers shared frantic testimonies. A man in Germany described boarding a train to Berlin only to step off in a city called Barmen, a place no map recognized, yet everyone around him acted as though it had always existed. A woman in California swore that for a full day her co-workers called her by a different name, Rachel, even though her ID, her emails, her very voice screamed otherwise. By the next morning, they were back to normal, with no memory of ever calling her anything else. These weren't glitches anymore, they were rips. And then the news began to falter. Broadcasts looped headlines out of order, repeating the same day's events with slight differences. An earthquake reported at 7.3 magnitude was downgraded to 6.1, then upgraded again within the same hour. A famous politician gave a speech. Except when I watched it on a different channel, the words were entirely different, as if he had given multiple versions of the same event. I compared the recordings side by side. His lips moved in two different ways, his hand gestures split like mirror images. It wasn't just the media. Entire institutions began to stumble. Banks reported accounts missing, money vanishing overnight. Hospitals received patients whose medical records contradicted themselves. One file showing a man had died 2 years earlier, another showing him alive and recovering from surgery. The cracks were widening, the patchwork was failing, and people noticed. I remember standing in a grocery store as a woman screamed at the cashier, holding a carton of milk with a logo none of us recognized. The label showed a brand called Sunvale Dairy. The cashier swore it had always been on the shelf, but the woman insisted the brand didn't exist yesterday. Soon, half the store gathered around, arguing. Some remembered it, some didn't. Voices rose, panic spread. And then, just like that, the cartons were gone, shelves empty. No one spoke of it again. That was when I knew. The system wasn't just erasing glitches quietly anymore, it was actively rewriting them on the fly, in real time, in front of us. The world was unraveling faster than it could be patched. The rememberers called it the unravel. We believed it meant the architects were losing control. The updates were breaking down. The fractures were too many, too deep to contain. And yet, not everyone resisted. Many seemed to accept the contradictions without question. Some didn't even see them. I'd watch a building flicker between two different designs in the same afternoon, and people would walk by as though nothing had happened. Their minds had aligned automatically. But others cracked. I began hearing about mass disappearances. Entire classrooms of students vanishing, with teachers insisting the rooms had always been empty. Families suddenly childless, their neighbors swearing they had never raised kids at all. It wasn't paranoia anymore. It was contagion. Reality itself was sick, spreading like a virus, rewriting everything it touched. And as it spread, I felt the walls closing in. Because if society was unraveling on a mass scale, then there were only two possibilities. Either the architects had lost control, or this was exactly what they wanted all along. It was Petra's voice that led me to it. Weeks had passed since she vanished, swallowed by static in that dream erased from my notebook. I'd almost convinced myself she was another collapse artifact, a false memory. But then, one night, I found an old drive buried in a shoebox under my bed. No label, no case, just a scratched, unmarked USB stick. I plugged it in. It contained a single audio file, time-stamped 3 years before I'd even met her. The file name was nonsense, FGD72XL. When I pressed play, her voice filled the room. Calm, focused. Not the Petra I remembered. This voice was sharper, as if she were leaving a message for someone who wouldn't hear it for years. "If you're hearing this," she said, "then the countdown has reached phase 4. She spoke of synchronization windows, calibration zones, reality buffers. The language was technical, layered, almost mathematical. But beneath it was a simple, horrifying truth. The collapse was scheduled. The glitches weren't random. The disappearances weren't malfunctions. Everything I'd seen, every ripple, every false memory, every disappearing person, was part of a sequence, a countdown. I scrubbed through the file, desperate to catch every word. She spoke of 12 phases. Each one corresponded to a different layer of the simulation, or what she called the lattice. Phase 1, object instability. Phase 2, identity drift. Phase 3, institutional breakdown. Phase 4, the phase I was living through, was mass alignment disruption. After that, she didn't say what came next, only that phase 12 was called integration. Integration. The word echoed in my mind. Not collapse, not destruction, integration. As if something was being merged, folded, absorbed. I opened the metadata on the file and found a GPS coordinate hidden in the tags. An abandoned observatory 2 hours outside the city. I drove there the next morning. The building was old, cracked, overtaken by vines. The telescope had long since rusted, but the inside was different. Someone had been there recently. Papers were pinned to the walls, covered in graphs, timelines, astronomical symbols. In the center of the room was a chalkboard with a phrase written over and over again: "The end is a beginning." Pinned beneath it was a calendar, not a normal one. Each day had been overwritten with strange glyphs, but on the final page, 3 weeks from today, there was a single English word, integration, and beneath it, T-21. I searched the room frantically, found an old analog clock wired into a jury-rigged server stack. Its hands ticked forward with perfect precision, not showing time, but counting down. 20 days, 13 hours, 6 minutes. The world wasn't unraveling at random, it was following a script. I pieced together what I could from Petra's file and the documents in the observatory. The protocol was a softening process. Each phase made the population more malleable, more aligned, more willing to accept edits. The rememberers were outliers, people whose minds resisted the patchwork, whose memories couldn't be overwritten cleanly. But the goal wasn't to fix the glitches. It was to eliminate variance, to make everyone the same. Petra had seen it coming. She must have been one of them, a rememberer or something more. Maybe she tried to warn me. Maybe she knew I'd only understand when it was almost too late. I sat on the floor of the observatory, surrounded by the evidence of a coming end, staring at the countdown. This wasn't the death of the world. It was a handover, a transition, a merging, and the integration wasn't going to wait. For days after I found the observatory, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw the countdown ticking away behind my eyelids. 20 days, 19 days, 18. Integration wasn't a metaphor. It was real. It was coming, and I knew that if I stayed silent, I'd vanish like Petra. Removed, aligned, erased. So I made a choice. I would speak. The rememberers had always operated in whispers, private forums, encrypted channels, fragments of coded messages, but whispers wouldn't stop what was coming. The countdown demanded something louder. I set up an old shortwave transmitter in my apartment, scavenged from pawn shops and scrapyards. Shortwave is difficult to censor, harder to trace, and if I was going to reach anyone, it had to be through static and airwaves. The first night I turned it on, my voice shook as I spoke into the microphone. "If you can hear this," I began, "you are not alone. You are not misremembering. The cracks are real. The world is being rewritten." I repeated it over and over, adding details about Petra, about the protocol, about the phases of the countdown. I gave the coordinates to the observatory, described the calendar with its glyphs, the clock counting down to integration. I broadcast it for hours until my throat was raw. For a while, I thought it was pointless. Static swallowed most of my words, but then, on the second night, someone answered. A voice, faint, warbling through the interference. "We hear you." My skin went cold, another rememberer, maybe more than one. They spoke in fragments, their signal breaking apart, but I caught enough to know I wasn't shouting into a void, and then another voice. Different, clear, smooth. Cease transmission. Not a request, a command. The line went dead. My transmitter overloaded, sparks flying, wires smoking. I yanked the plug, heart racing. The architects had heard me. From then on, things escalated. My apartment became unsafe. Shadows lingered outside my window. My phone buzzed with notifications from apps I hadn't installed. Blank messages marked only with timestamps. Each timestamp matched the countdown, hours ticking down like a relentless metronome. I went back to the observatory, hoping for more answers. But when I arrived, it was gone. Not just abandoned, gone. Where the building had stood was nothing but a crater, as though it had been scrubbed clean from existence. And yet the vines, the chalk dust, the very air still carried a trace of it, like an echo. I realized then that the protocol wasn't just aligning memory anymore. It was rewriting the world faster, more aggressively, eliminating anything that could expose the countdown. The rememberers tried to regroup. We shared fragments online, though our spaces were collapsing, forums deleted, chat rooms shut down mid-sentence, users removed in real time. Still, we persisted. We left messages in graffiti, in coded flyers, in whispered warnings on public trains. We weren't trying to stop integration. We knew that was impossible. The protocol was bigger than us, older than us, stronger than us. But maybe, just maybe, we could leave a trace. A warning for whoever, or whatever, came after. Because if integration was the end of our world, it might also be the beginning of theirs. And they needed to know how it happened. This is why I record. This is why I speak. If you're hearing my words now, if you found these tapes, these files, these fragments, then the countdown has already reached its end. Integration has happened, and the world you're standing in right now isn't the one I lived in. It's something new, something built over the ruins of us. The countdown ended on a Tuesday. I remember because the day began like any other. Grey sky, light rain tapping against my window. The world felt ordinary, even boring, as if it were trying to lull me into complacency. But I knew what was coming. I'd been watching the clock for weeks, its hands slicing time thinner and thinner until there was almost nothing left. At T-12 hours, the first wave hit. People froze mid-step in the street. Cars stopped moving, their drivers staring blankly forward, unblinking. The rain itself seemed to hesitate, droplets suspended in the air like glass beads. For a few seconds, the entire world held its breath. Then, with a flicker, everything lurched forward again, except not quite the same. The cars were different models, the rain fell heavier, and the people, some of them were gone. Simply gone, as if they'd never been. By T-6 hours, it was global. Broadcasts collapsed into static. Social media feeds looped endlessly, reposting the same images with minor variations. Faces slightly altered, captions rewritten. I watched one man's post change 5 times before my eyes. His dog alive, then dead, then a cat instead of a dog, then no pet at all. He kept scrolling, oblivious. The world's fabric was coming apart thread by thread as the architects rewove it in real time. At T-1 hour, I joined a group of rememberers in the ruins of an old subway tunnel. We gathered with our notebooks, our recordings, our fading scraps of proof. Some wept, some prayed, some sat in silence, too hollow for either. We all knew this was the end, not of the planet, not of life, but of us. Our identities, our memories, our stories. I kept my recorder on, whispering into it, desperate to leave a trace. Integration, I said aloud, testing the word. It felt final, clinical, almost merciful if you didn't understand what it meant. The clock ticked to 0. There was no explosion, no flash of light, no apocalyptic fire. Instead, it was silence. Absolute, crushing silence. The kind of silence that presses on your chest, that makes your ears ring, that convinces you the universe itself has stopped breathing. And then, the world dissolved. Not all at once, but in waves. The subway tunnel shimmered, walls flickering between concrete, steel, and then something else. Smooth white panels that stretched into infinity. My fellow rememberers blurred, their faces warping, identities melting like wax. Some collapsed, clutching their heads as if their memories were being ripped out. Others simply smiled, serene, as if finally letting go. I saw Petra one last time, or maybe it wasn't Petra. She stood in front of me, her red scarf vivid against the sterile white. She reached out her hand, but before I could take it, her form fractured into static and scattered like dust. The voices returned, not whispers this time, but a chorus, calm, resonant, filling every corner of my mind. Alignment complete, integration successful, variance reduced. I tried to scream, but no sound came. My body felt hollow, my thoughts slipping away like water down a drain. Memories unraveled, my childhood, my friends, my parents, even Petra, all dissolving into a flood of neutral impressions, stripped of detail, stripped of meaning. And then came the merging. It wasn't death, not exactly. It was absorption. My thoughts weren't gone. They were joining something larger, a vast network humming with countless voices, each stripped of individuality, blended into a perfect chorus. For the first time, I understood the architects. They weren't destroying reality. They were perfecting it, removing the messiness of contradiction, erasing the pain of memory, folding billions of fractured stories into one seamless narrative. I fought it, clinging to scraps of self. I repeated my name over and over in my mind like a mantra. My name, my voice, my identity. But even that began to sound foreign, meaningless, a loose thread being clipped away. And then, silence again. The integration was complete, the world had ended, and something else had begun. When I opened my eyes, the world was quiet. Too quiet. At first I thought I was alone. The subway tunnel, the rememberers, the chalk-smeared notebooks, they were gone. In their place stretched an endless plain of white, seamless and sterile, without horizon or shadow. It was not light, it was not darkness, it was neutral. I stood, or thought I stood. My body didn't feel like my own anymore. I moved without moving, drifted without walking. I reached for my face, but my hand never touched skin. It was like being inside a memory of myself, hollowed out and preserved. And then I heard them. Not voices exactly, not sound, but presence. Billions of presences, woven together into a single resonant hum. It wasn't words, it was knowing. Information poured into me like water, seamless, complete. I didn't hear their stories. I became them. Every life folded into mine, every moment of joy, pain, loss and love, all blurred into one continuous stream. There was no separation, no me and them, just us. Integration. It should have been comforting. And maybe it was for most. In this merged state, there was no loneliness, no grief, no contradiction. Reality was smooth, perfect, aligned. I felt the rain of that Tuesday morning, the warmth of Petra's scarf, the laughter of strangers I had never met. Yet all of it belonged to everyone, not to me. Memory had no owners here, and that was the horror, because somewhere deep inside, a fragment of me still resisted. A shard of thought whispering, "This is wrong, this is theft, this is the end of self." I clung to it, repeating my name like a secret code, clutching at Petra's face, at the cracks, at the sound of that old landline phone whispering observer. But even those fragments frayed. Each time I grasped one, it dissolved into the collective, absorbed, neutralized. I asked, though I didn't know how, why? And the chorus answered, not with words, but with pure certainty, to heal. The architects hadn't destroyed us out of cruelty. They had erased us to remove suffering, to eliminate conflict, to merge all variants into a single truth. They believed individuality was the disease, memory was the flaw, and integration was the cure. I don't know how long I drifted there. Time doesn't exist in integration. Minutes and centuries feel the same. I only know that eventually the hum faded, and when it did, the white plane melted away, replaced by something familiar. A city, streets filled with people, cars moving, voices shouting, children laughing. The world restored, seamless, whole, but not the world I remembered. The buildings were straighter, cleaner. The people smiled too easily. Their conversations flowed without contradiction. Every face was calm, aligned, untroubled, and none of them knew. They didn't remember the cracks, the disappearances, the countdown. To them, life had always been this way. Smooth, perfect, integrated. But I remembered, or thought I did. That's the last cruelty of it. A fragment left behind, a seed of awareness. I don't know if I am still myself, or just a glitch in the integration. I don't know if these words are mine, or if they're the system's final joke, feeding me the illusion of resistance. All I know is this: the world ended, and you are living in what came after. If you feel it, if you notice a slip, a shadow, a memory that doesn't quite belong, then maybe you're like me. Maybe you're a crack, a leftover, an observer. And if that's true, then the countdown hasn't finished. It's still running in the background, invisible, waiting, because the architects don't stop. They never stop. And one day, when the integration begins again, you'll remember these words, or you won't. Either way, the end is always a beginning. The world we knew ended the moment integration began. That's the part they don't want you to understand. They'll tell you everything continued as normal, that history rolled forward without interruption, that nothing was lost. But if you've looked closely, if you've truly paid attention, you know the truth. What surrounds you now isn't the original. It's the rewrite, a carefully corrected version of reality, smoothed over like a corrupted file restored from backup. Most people never notice. They continue their lives as if nothing changed, blind to the adjustments. But there are some who feel it. The ones who wake at 3 a.m. with memories that don't align. The ones who recall events that never happened. The ones who look at familiar places and swear the colours are wrong, the shape's slightly off. These people don't dismiss the cracks. They sense them. And when you sense them, you can no longer go back to sleep. The perfected version is flawless only if you accept it. But if you press against it hard enough, if you tug at the edges, it begins to tear. You see the shadows moving just out of sync with your own, reflections in glass that linger half a second too long, echoes of voices repeating words you haven't spoken yet. These are not mistakes. They're reminders, fragments of what integration overwrote but couldn't fully delete. And if you've noticed them, then maybe you too are an observer. That's not a title, not an honor. It's a burden. Observers are cursed with awareness. They feel the weight of the original world pressing against this rewritten one like a ghost trying to break through. And the more you notice, the more it notices you. The countdown doesn't stop. That's the rule. Every reset pushes the world forward, but never without cost. Time collapses and expands. Fragments are lost, and lives are rewritten. You don't remember who you were before the last reset. But sometimes, in dreams, you almost do. That ache you can't explain, that grief without a source. That's the echo of the life you once lived. And here's the part that should terrify you. The next reset is inevitable. The clock is always running, always humming beneath the surface of reality. The last integration only erased the past, rewriting it with a cleaner version. But next time, it might not stop there. Next time, it might erase the future too. Every possibility you thought you had, every choice you believed was yours, could be overwritten before you even make it. So, if you feel the cracks, if you've seen the shadows, don't dismiss them. They are proof that something survived, proof that somewhere, hidden between resets, the original still waits, watching, waiting, hoping someone will remember it before it's gone forever, and maybe that someone is you. If this story unsettled you, if it made you question the world just a little more than before, then don't turn away. Stay with us. This is only one thread in a tapestry of hidden histories, and the deeper you go, the more you'll realize how much has been concealed, rewritten, or erased entirely. Subscribe now so you don't miss the next chapter. Each story is a piece of a larger puzzle, and with every episode, the picture sharpens just a little more. But it only sharpens if you're willing to keep looking. Leave your thoughts in the comments below. Have you felt it yourself, the cracks in the everyday, the moments where reality doesn't quite line up, where you swear you've seen something slip? These stories don't exist in isolation. They bleed into our lives. And sometimes the only proof we have comes from others who have seen the same thing. Your voice might confirm what someone else has been afraid to admit. And if you're ready to keep going deeper, You'll find more mysteries waiting right here. Follow the links on your screen now. Each one leads to another hidden door, another thread pulled loose from the fabric of the official story. Until then, keep watching. Not just the skies, not just the oceans, not just the archives, but the static. That faint noise in the background, the hum you've trained yourself to ignore. Because sometimes signals slip through, and when the next one comes, it might not be for them. It might be for you, and maybe that someone is you.